So is this the final nail in the coffin for any conspiracy theory concerning the Essex boys' murders, famously down Workhouse Lane in Essex, of Pat Tate, Craig Rolfe and Tony Tucker, the men convicted, Jack Wilms and Mickey Steele, and the apparent supergrass Darren Nichols? And there have been YouTube channels created off of the back of this with the conspiracy theories, but you have to remember that in 1995, 1996, cell site evidence was brand new. If you look at any criminal case in the UK today, cell site evidence is a staple of any criminal case in court. It is that reliable in court for a jury. It's very hard to disbelieve it. There has to be exceptional circumstances to disprove cell site evidence. And in 1995 and 1996, cell site evidence was brand new technology. In fact, the Essex boys case was one of the first cases that cell site evidence was relied upon to gain a conviction. And bearing that in mind, you have to take into consideration that anyone that was participating in a crime with a mobile phone, now when I say mobile phone, I'm talking about the old Nokias, the old Sagams. These weren't smartphones. These were basic phones that you could call and text on. And I've been over this in previous posts. The way it works, you make a call, that phone will link to a nearby tower. The tower contains 3 plates, which gives a direction. So if you're west of the tower, it will connect to the west plate. If you're north of the tower, it will connect to the north plate. So they can get a very good idea of the directional travel of a mobile phone device as it moves through the country. Now, bearing in mind that cell site technology was not a thing then. So criminals weren't taking it into consideration when they were carrying out offences. And that's exactly what happened in this case. Mickey Steele and Jack Wilms were not concerned about mobile phone evidence because they didn't know about it. And when it's put together in this sort of way, it's very difficult to believe that they're not guilty of participating in those murders. Could there have been another person involved? Yes, there could have. That you have to take into consideration, because you have to bear in mind that that person might not have had a mobile device on them. But for Jack Wilms and Mickey Steele to say, look, this is nothing to do with us, blah, blah, blah. Any jury that sees this cell site evidence, you're going to get a guilty. It's as simple as that. You are going to get, unless you can prove that somebody else had your mobile phone and you can physically put yourself somewhere else, you're going to get a guilty. Because the way this is laid out, you can see the direction of travel of Darren Nichols and Jack Wilms. You can see the direction of travel of the Range Rover. You can see them going to the murder location. That, coupled with the fact that there was a separate statement made by the member of public that saw the Range Rover turning into Workhouse Lane, and they saw Mickey Steele in the back of the vehicle looking behind him to make sure that they weren't being followed. That wasn't Darren Nichols. That was an independent witness. There are independent witnesses that clearly state that there was reasons for the murders taking place. There were people physically going to locations and looking for Tony Tucker for money that was owed. So for me, this is the nail in the coffin. I don't know why this sort of cell site evidence wasn't released in this type of format years ago, because it would have killed dead any conspiracy theories. For anyone to suggest now that the right people aren't behind bars, I think you would have to take a hard look at it. And I myself was guilty of falling foul of these conspiracy theories, where you sort of start to listen to the bullshit. And it's very difficult, especially with social media and the YouTube channels. You start to think, hold on, maybe it weren't them. But when it's put in this format, there is no doubt. There is no doubt that these two were involved in these murders. You can't say that they weren't. The odds on you doing these sorts of movements on cell site at the time of a murder and not being involved in it are like 1,000,000,000 to 1. There's no way. There's just no fucking way that you are not involved in some shape in those murders. It's just impossible. And you can say what you want about the Supergrass, but the fact is there is a lot of evidence. Take Darren Nichols completely out of it, there was still a lot of evidence pointing towards them from the very, very beginning. They had Mickey Steele's name brought up at the very beginning of the investigation, before Darren Nichols was even arrested for getting caught with a load of weed, which is why he turned Supergrass. Even before all of that, they had already been given Mickey Steele's name. So, for me, this is the nail in the coffin. It's case closed. There is no doubt. There is no big conspiracy theory to say that they weren't involved and it was all listen, there's no coincidence with murders on that scale like that. There's no way. If you're not involved in it, you're not there. You're nowhere near it, and you've got witnesses to put you somewhere else. They're there. They're at the scene before, during, and after. There's no way that they're not involved. It's just, as much as I want to say something to get them released, even though one of them is out now, you can't rebut that evidence. You just can't do it. It's impossible. So for me, this is the nail in the coffin. It's been a nice ride with all of the entertainment and the hours that I've watched on it over the years. But for me, that's it. It's case done now. And that's it for the Essex Boys murders.